back in the 90s, we were taking nothing or water or 30 grams an hour at top end. Now you have cyclists taking 120 or 150 grams an hour. It's a totally different game. Performance is far better than it's improving it dramatically, and fueling has a lot to do with it.
Welcome to the Buffalo Marathon Podcast. Let's go!
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
I feel like I am part of Bill's Mafia. The Go Bills is part of my vocabulary.
The Buffalo Marathon Podcast is presented by our official training partner, Run Smart. Whether you're training for the full marathon, the half, or the 5K, the Run Smart app helps you train smarter with plans and guidance built by physical therapists who understand runners. From your first run to race weekend, Run Smart helps you show up prepared. Head to the App Store and download the Run Smart app today.
Today's episode is with Bill Armstrong, co-founder of Neversecond with his wife, the official on-course fueling sponsor of the Buffalo Marathon. We're breaking down what's changed in fueling, what you'll be seeing on race day, and how to use it to perform your best. Enjoy this conversation with Bill.
Well, I think for us it was more important to be like, what unique difference are we bringing to the market? And I think that's because, and I give Oscar credit for really clarifying that for me, because as an entrepreneur, I didn't want to waste time or money, and if we could help it. And so, he said, Bill, I've been doing this for 30 years, and he is the pivotal scientist in the study of multiple transportable carbohydrates is probably what he's really known for. He's really modern fueling. You're hearing athletes take these enormous values. They were, I think, runners inherently are going to point to shoes, and cyclists will point to wheels or frames or weight. Fueling I would argue, has a larger impact on performance than those items, and you're seeing those tremendous changes is largely owed to Oscar's research. But early on, we said, look, what unique value are we bringing to the market that they're not already seeing? And he said, look, athletes are just taking different stuff and they're never getting any better at a protocol. So really how we're different is that we're a system of products. They all use the same carbohydrate composition, whether it's a gel, a fluid, a bar. They can be mixed or matched. They use 30-gram increments because the global guidelines for endurance fueling are based on multiples of 30. You're taking 60 grams or 90 or 120. They're all multiples of 30, but you have a 22-gram gel. So how many do you take to reach 90? Very difficult to calculate that 5 hours into an event. The head math becomes much more difficult. And some products have sodium, some don't. So they have high sodium for no particular reason, or too low a sodium. Everything we have is, the number is assigned as the right number based on the fueling guidelines, the global fueling guidelines. So really systematically, we're able to help every athlete perfect a protocol that delivers more consistent results, more consistently high results. So if you're a cyclist who's competing 40 times a year and you have 20 bad races and 20 good races, you might be able to change that number where there are a lot more good races and a lot fewer bad races. And that's really what proper fueling can do. Is you can always have a lucky day, but if with proper fueling, you can really take out those lows and really even out your performance. And so that's really how we're different as a brand, is that system focus. And then that's the products themselves. Oscar will say, this is the science. This is how we need to build this product. This is what it needs to have or not have. And then my wife, Lauren, and I spend the time with the labs figuring out how to make it.
Okay.
And
so
that's
that takes you back to your roots, really, right? Like, hey, we got to make this thing and figure out how to make the product of it.
Yeah, and like the little things that aggravate people, like they complain about drink mix caking at the bottom or gumming up at the bottom of a bottle. How do you not have that happen? How do you make sure that you're getting good gastric emptying? Athletes aren't getting sloshing in their stomach. How do you modify the formulas to do that? Do people like thinner or thicker products? How is the product in heat and cold and these sorts of things? You're looking to kind of those little things that make people happy when they're using the product to make them have a better day.
Yeah. I definitely want to get into the protocol side of this, but when you came up with the formulation, do you still is the basis of what you use today where you started, or has it evolved? And do you guys mess with it to try to get it even better year over year? Or is it, no, we've got the core foundation down. We're really not making much changes. We're implementing the system, teaching the system, and going from there.
That's a great question. So we are always tweaking the formulas. I mean, to me, that's our job. And I think you see that with a lot of brands that become irrelevant. It's because they stopped innovation and they stopped tweaking and they stopped improving. They just were like, it's good, let's leave it alone. And eventually the science progresses and brands are progressing. And if you don't progress and stay on top of that, eventually you'll get run over. So for us, it's really important to constantly tweak the formulas. The science isn't really different. And we are right now just adding products that have, for instance, different ratios of carbohydrate. We're creating a chew this year. These are different formats, but they're still scientifically, they're coming from the same place. We are also working on an innovation pipeline, but we do spend a lot of time noodling the little things. Like one of the complaints we get is how sometimes it's hard to open your gel pack. Sometimes I can't open it easily, so or I cut my lip on it. We're always thinking about these things just because we want to try and you'll never eliminate all complaints, but
Sure.
we try and eliminate as much as we can. But then we do tweak the formulas pretty regularly to kind of without, if we can improve a flavor, for instance, and it goes from being an 8 to a 10, we want to do that because we want athletes to really adore the products. That's really important.
Yeah. So I have so many different questions on like the challenges of gels, just because as a gel user for a long time. But before I get to that, I'm just curious, you guys, is it right that you guys started in cycling, then went to trail running, and now you're kind of moving towards the road scene? Is that how the brand progressed?
Yeah, I would say so. We originally started in Europe and the US at the same time. Europe, road cycling is king, and gravel or off-road cycling was, I don't want to say non-existent, but pretty sleepy in Europe at the time when we started. We sponsored a couple of world tour teams, built, I think, a strong reputation among road cyclists for our products. We really started exploring like how do we work with athletes and how do we communicate and privateers at the time. There was this word. I was hearing about privateer athletes, and I was like, what's a privateer? And they were these, athletes kind of doing it on their own, and they would negotiating contracts and representing brands directly, and that was really exciting for us. That led us towards off-road cycling, mountain bike and gravel. Keegan Swenson was really I'd say one of our pivotal athletes. It was the first time we really made a deliberate decision to work with an athlete based on values. I loved his values. I loved the way he approaches product, the way he thinks about everything, thinks about the details, and so he was a perfect addition for us. So we really very quickly built a very strong following in gravel and mountain bike. We also started working with events then at that point, really, with 24 Hours in the Old Pueblo was our first event we ever did in Arizona. We then became the main sponsor for Belgian Waffle Ride, most of the Lifetime races, which are, the marquee races within the United States. From then we really started thinking, well, if off-road cyclists love what we do, we bet the off-road runners would too. And so then we moved into trail running as kind of a gateway into road running. We were like, and the good news is the trail runners, one of the first signings we had was Jim Walmsley. Jim came to us. Yeah, I was going to say Jim was using the products. So my wife said to me, who's this guy, Jim Walmsley? And I was like, we should know. And she said, he's
pull up the documentary.
It's amazing. Yeah, Jim was experimenting with the problems on his own. And so from there, we had a lot of success in trail, and we followed the same path. And to your question, we've been rolling out sport by sport. We've really used trail running as a means to enter road running. It was always in the plan. Last year, we started really pushing into road running. We're in the process of sponsoring a few key athletes in the road space and starting to work with events as well. We're continuing with Indianapolis on a long-term partnership. We're talking to a couple of other majors, and then of course Buffalo as well. We're really excited to be entering and doing more in the road space now.
Awesome. So if we if someone's going to get started in the road space, say they're using a different gel at this point and they're not married to it, how do they get started? So you have a system and they're running a marathon or a half marathon. Like from your standpoint, how do you recommend people get started with the 30, 60, 90, 120? Obviously not going straight to 120 isn't the solution, but what would you recommend for runners to start with Neversecond?
It's a really great question. So first of all, I always say the sport has a lot to do with it. Cyclists, first of all, can take 100. The professionals and cyclists, 120 is the baseline now. They're all taking 120 at the high level. Now, mind you, that's professionals.
There's also no jostling, right? Like it's a little bit easier on the tummy.
Yeah, it's a lot easier on the stomach. They can take 90, but your amateur riders are easily taking 90 grams an hour on the bike now. With the jostling of running, we also see some separation between trail runners and road runners. I would never give them the same advice. Trail runner has, especially the long course trail runners, the ultra runners, they might be out for 12 to 24 hours. They've got periods of walking or uphill where they could possibly change their strategy. Their intensity isn't necessarily as high as a marathoner. Now you go into the marathon and half marathon. Good news is it's a very simple advice. If a person meets me and I've never met them before and they're saying, hey, I'm doing this marathon, what should I do? I'd say the good news is this. With our products, you're really going to be relying, because with cyclists, they're using drink mix, they're using gels, sometimes they're using bars. With marathon, it's pretty much gel and water. Simple. You can use on-course water. Our system is really designed around practicality too. Runners, for the most part, are drinking on-course water. They should take roughly 60 grams an hour. That should be extremely tolerable with our products. That's the one thing. A lot of athletes will come to us and say, look, I've used other gels and I can't take more than one in an hour. I start to get sick. The difference is when you deal with a high performance product is you can take more product without the risk of getting sick. So my advice to a marathoner who I met would be take 60 grams an hour. That is because it's a 30 gram gel, or C30 gel is 30 grams of carbohydrate. Take one every half hour. It's really that simple. And then just top off water based on thirst. It's really the easiest event to plan for and execute. And if I met someone and they've never used our products before, I'd give them that advice to race tomorrow with a gel every 30 minutes, and that would be absolutely fine. They should have, in a perfect world, they would use it during training. I do recommend some level of gut training. What does that mean? That means training with the products, maybe 2 or 3 key sessions a week for 6 to 8 weeks prior to the event, so that you're very used to taking it. That's everything from how do you tear it open, do you take it right away, or do you nurse it for a mile, and how does your body react to it? I would say humbly we have next to zero complaints about stomach problems. And so I always encourage people to test the products though, just to make sure that it's working for them.
How do you, the stomach and the jostling, the stomach closes off and says, hey, nothing's getting through. How do you guys address that issue compared to like other products? Because I know like that water balloon feeling, people get stuck in that. Is that just, from your standpoint, what's the cause of that? How do you guys address it? I've heard it's, you get the caloric, there's just too many calories in the stomach that's not diluted enough. So the stomach's closing off. I'm sure you guys have done some research here and you've done things to combat it, it sounds like. How do you guys think about that?
Well, if we're speaking about, the formula itself is designed for fast emptying, meaning going into the stomach and dispersing. That's really what it's designed. That's the efficiency of the composition. We use a 2-to-1 glucose to fructose. So it's also an isotonic gel. A lot of the classic gels are this super thick, almost like a cake frosting. They're sticky, goopy type product. So inherently you have to chase them with water. With our products, because they're thin, they're really more like a heavy liquid. So now some athletes have said, look, I have a hard time getting, it's only 60 ml, it's 2 ounces. It's not a lot of volume. If you're a typical athlete at like an aid station, they'll say, well, how much water should I try and get in? Realistically, most people are able to get 3 ounces of water in at an aid station. So these gels are 2 ounces. Pretty small overall in terms of volume, but I will tell some athletes, maybe if you want to you have a hard time taking 60 ml at one time, you can maybe nurse that over. You don't have to take it all at one time. You can maybe nurse it over a half mile or a mile to get it in. But I think overall that the big advantages of our product is they don't have a really, really high sweetness profile. A lot of the products in that feeling, that mental, when you're taking something really sweet, it is also can send a message that it's just really hard to take the whole thing in. With our products, you're going to find they're a lot more dilute, not as sweet, so you can get them down a lot easier. And that's the feedback we get from nearly every athlete we come into contact with, is how much easier it is to take them in than other products.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the two things that I run into. I've been around runners for a long time, coach runners. We have a lot of runners using our app, and consistency, like what's the texture and what's the flavor, are like the two things that I come back to. The texture is usually the big one, because back in the day, the goos were like syrup, thick syrup, and that's kind of what everyone has in their head. Was that kind of the early findings you guys were finding that made the biggest difference, and just like the end user of what they tolerate and what they like was more of the consistency of the gel?
Yeah, that's usually the reaction. I mean, we meet athletes all the time that say, I hate gels. And it's always for the same reason. It's not a unique conversation. We hear it a lot. And it's because they think of that cake frosting that they can't get down. And it's really sweet, and it gives them just about a headache. It's so sweet. Because it's compact, and and a lot of them are using less than ideal compositions, like low cost products. They're low cost raw materials, lower cost. And so we use verbatim 2-to-1 maltodextrin to fructose. It's not as sweet inherently. It's usually when 100% of the time, or nearly 100% of the time, when they say this to us and they taste, we sample at every event. We typically sample on spoons so they can try it. They're usually blown away by the difference, and it makes them rethink their entire process. They're like, okay, everything I've thought to this point, I need to rethink. And that's, I think, for us, gives us a lot, like being able to have that positive impact on someone's race. Because if you can take product, you can take 60 grams an hour, more likely than not, you're going to have a much better day out there. Like that idea of all these classic problems that we believed were a necessary part of running, eventually you're going to bonk. Doesn't have to happen if you feel correctly. And that's, I think, that's a major change. So when that mile 18 to 26, when things for a lot of athletes go to hell, you can avoid it, which is a real blessing.
Yeah. What's the science behind the 2-to-1 ratio versus, what's having its moment right now? The nerd gummy clusters. Like, I don't know if you've caught this, like a lot of people taking those. So what's the importance of that 2-to-1 ratio when it comes to the formula?
That's a great question. So I think the best way to describe it is like this. Pre-Oscar, imagine you had a group of like 100 people in a room, and you said, everybody leave the room through this one door. That's glucose. They leave one at a time. The most you can take is maybe 30 grams an hour, because there's only one transporter for, in that case, glucose. Post-Oscar, there's a multiple transportable carbohydrate, 2 different carbohydrate sources, 2 different pathways. You've opened a separate door. So now 30 grams an hour overnight became 90. And that's really to simplify Oscar's research. He studied which carbohydrate blends were the most efficient. 2-to-1 is one of the most efficient carbohydrate compositions. So up to roughly 120 grams an hour, 2-to-1 is an ideal choice. When you start going up 120, 150, there's usually some modifications that need at that point, but that's really what the ratio is. This, you hear a lot of brands talk about the ratios. 2-to-1 is a very strong ratio when you take into account all of the different attributes. So taste, sweetness profile. For runners, I think 2-to-1 is really the ideal ratio, because most of them aren't taking, especially marathoners, aren't taking more than 100, they're not taking more than 90 grams an hour. So it really becomes.
They're starting to get up there. Did you ever think we'd be at this point where you talk about performance a lot, but there's also a huge part of this with recovery. So like, if you under fuel in a race or a long run, like that doesn't just live in that start to end on your watch. Like you're under fueled, then you're coming out of the graveyard trying to get yourself back post run. So I think there's a huge recovery piece. I think it's just crazy. Like we went from one of my first mentors ran low 4-minute miler, great runner. He always was like that old guy was like, you don't need all that stuff, just run. And now we come, and then it turned into like a gel an hour. Now you see like some of I'm thinking of like David Roach, who like he does 120 an hour for like 18 hours. And it's crazy how we got here. I feel like we got here fairly quick. It's like one of those things that's an overnight success with 20 years in the making. But do you ever feel like obviously you thought we were going to get here, but I got to imagine 10 years ago when you're running and things, you might be like, yeah, it's not like nutrition's going to take a while to come around, or like, what do you think?
I'm amazed at how quickly it has evolved. It has evolved. It just happened to be the time we came in the sport. It evolved very fast, simultaneously. It was pretty shocking. And every time we're thinking we're totally on top of it, we're having to really, we can't be passive at this point, because we're being challenged at every turn. Keegan's a great example. Keegan Swenson's one of our most dialed athletes. Every time I meet him, he's got thoughts for me about what we could or should do. And that's important to listen. I think a lot of brands don't listen enough to what the feedback in the market, and you want to listen because it's going to help you make those products better. World Tour riders, interesting statistic, I think only 10 years ago were taking maybe 45 to 60 grams an hour. There's not one that's taken less than 120 now.
Yeah.
Or all of them. I remember even when we started at Neversecond, someone said to me this number was, an average was 87 grams an hour for the men in the World Tour level. And that's so in 5 years, it's gone from 87 to 120. And so they're all pushing these high intakes and trying to optimize. And it's, and it doesn't, and I think the runners, frankly, are catching up. They're historically, I'd say 5+ years behind the cyclists. Cyclists are really at the top end in terms of their understanding around fueling. I mean, Jim Walmsley learned about us from watching World Tour cycling. He's like, what's this brand Neversecond? I got to check this stuff out. He saw it on cycling. And cyclists are just gear people. They're super dialed in. I totally understand the classic old school runner who's like, you don't need anything. As a runner, I probably came from that camp.
Yeah.
But now runners, what you're going to see, and we're seeing it in trail running, like we work with most of the top trail runners, work with, Ruth Croft, Jim Walmsley, Abby Hall, Ann Flower. They're all absolutely dependent upon higher intakes. I mean, Ruth, I saw during the last stage of UTMB when she won this past year, she literally took 90 grams of gel at one shot. So she took 3 gels back to back at one aid station because she just like, but it got her through. And I don't know how it would have been if she didn't take nutrition at that point. It probably could have gone south very easily. Now in marathon, where it's higher intensity, shorter race, I don't think it's a matter of necessarily like complete survival or not survival. It's more of a matter of really optimizing and having a better day. But at the very tip of the spear, the professional athletes you're going to see, as they start to continue to optimize their nutrition, you're going to see a lot of new records, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy too. The one I mentioned this to you when we talked briefly before this about the research that was coming out, because research continues to evolve. We keep learning new things. You're going to probably dial in like what's the right amount. It's probably individualized to some extent. But you just mentioned with UTMB, she took 90 grams in an hour. And, I think what's pretty clear is like that's not getting stored in the muscle. It's not getting stored in the liver. It's circulating in the blood. I don't know if you had time to look at it, but it just reminds me like how much is it available in the blood, and is blood glucose driving to some extent, how you feel? Because when she takes 90 grams, she's spiking her blood glucose more than anything probably. And you'll see this time, I mentioned it to you, you see it time and time, like I got a little Coke in me, the soft drink, Coke, and then I took, something else that was a little sugary, and I came back from the dead. And you see this a lot in the ultras, but I don't know if your thoughts on that coming in this space, if you had time to look at it, or just at, first blush, what you think of that.
I mean, at that point, Ruth is in survival mode. She's at the last aid station, and she's been out for 20 something hours, and she's had an overnight and nearly froze, and it was like horrendous conditions. So she was just survival mode, and a lot of times you're doing what you got to do at that point. If I was to give advice to people, obviously it'd be consistent intakes. I wouldn't tell your average Joe to go and take 90 grams of carbohydrate in one 20-second shot of time. But I mean, we have athletes come and buy 24 caffeinated gels, and they don't buy any regular ones, and I have to ask them, like, hey, what are you doing? Because usually we're trying not to be everyone's parents, but we're trying to also impart with some wisdom where we can. But I think we always try and recommend this kind of stable and consistent intake is the most important thing. So that's why your marathoner is taking 30 grams every 30 minutes. If you're on a bike, I prefer drink mix on the bike, because you can. Runners can't have that much fluid intake, but when you're taking our drink mixes, you're not getting that spikiness that you get with the gels. It's a bit more stable, your blood glucose, obviously, when you're taking our drink mixes. Cyclists typically are relying like 70% on drink mix and 30% gel. Runners, it's pretty much in marathon, it's a matter of practicality, and they don't want to have so much sloshing. So it's going to be gels and water become their product of choice. But inherently you're getting these kind of spike and then drop. But to me, it's still the best system that's out there for your marathon.
Yeah, I think even to that point, what I'll see a lot in practice, especially like you'll see this at the high end level, but also first time marathoners is, they won't finish that run like, oh, I'm at mile 20. They stop fueling. They don't take their gels for the last 6 or whatever. And I think that's when a lot of the crashing happens. And if you get to the point where you're already getting like, what I think of as like you're hitting the wall, you're getting a little cranky, you're getting a little moody, and you're starting to have mental fatigue, physical fatigue. Those are the signs that you're drifting off the edge and need to get some gel in quickly. So having an emergency gel or just making sure. But I also know in practicality, it sounds like you guys are solving for this. If you're out there, like your body can turn a little bit, you can have an off day, and all of a sudden you have no appetite and you can't keep it down. So I think the practice part is so important. And then just not getting, for people who are in like those long training runs or even on race day for a marathon, the fueling through the finish, I think, is so important. Even if you're like taking a gel at mile 23, like I know my mindset was like, it's only 3 more miles, but that 3 more miles can turn into a nightmare if you're not fueling through the finish.
I agree 100% with you. It's very common that happens. And what you said earlier about recovery, when we talk about recovery, a lot of athletes immediately think of protein, and they forget the importance of carbohydrate as a function of recovery. Like what you're doing, how you're recovering, you need to restock your glycogen supply, and so fueling the whole way through is important, an important part of it. A lot of times we'll tell athletes when you're done, they'll inherently run towards like our P30 mix, our recovery mix, but I'm like, make sure you get some carbohydrate when you're done as well. Doesn't have to be necessarily immediate, but because sometimes you just don't feel like eating when you're towards the end, but having within maybe 20 to 30 minutes after finishing, just making sure you restart to replenish the glycogen and carbohydrate. Gels are a great way to do that. Drink mix is a great way to do that. I do recommend drink mix. By the way, our drink mix is also a great source for for carb loading. Back in my racing days, we used to think of carb loading as eating your face off with food, and inherently a lot of times you go to the starting line feeling kind of heavy. And I think the philosophically it's a bit different now. The shift has been, well, you're tapering hopefully before a race, and your glycogen reserves are starting to replenish, and maybe you're taking in an extra serving of, maybe it's 25% more intake in the few days before your event. But C30 Sport Drink, which is our drink mix, it is replenishing carbohydrate, sodium, topping these off with fluid because you're drinking it with fluid. It's a great way to carb load in the days before an event without paying the price of overeating. So it's just another nuance there when we talk about the importance, as carbohydrate and fluid and sodium as all components of recovery.
When did an episode not too long ago with a dietitian who I've used for years, and we've done some programming with the anabolic window. She talks about 90 minutes post exercise. It's when you're going to get your maximum recovery. Your body's starving. It wants the things that it needs. And we talk about the protein as being the building block for recovery. And to your point, you have to replenish glycogen stores. But from the research that we talked through and we were looking at, the carbohydrate also increases availability for protein to be absorbed. So, getting done and not just taking a straight shake, but taking it and getting some carbohydrate with it is really good. I know personally, I think about, on the other hand, carb loading. When we talked about that, if you're fully carb loaded, you get 90 minutes of exercise out of that. So being, front loading that, because that's going to be your stored energy, is great. And I agree. I traditionally haven't done a mix, but I'm interested in trying it for some of my upcoming long runs. We always had trouble. Like my wife and I, when we do marathons, we're like, oh my God, I can't eat more bread. I'm so sick. But we started switching like things like apple juice and stuff, which would just, get the carbs in, be, much lighter on the body. So it'd be interesting to try some of that. And I agree, like the drink mix makes a huge difference.
It can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you, one of the things I think that I'm interested in your take on, being in this space is there's this, I guess it's on a leading edge of a movement, which is, the sports drink industry, which, traditionally the Gatorades and stuff like that had great marketing teams that push this electrolyte theory. And you're starting to see brands come out where this is more, it's less of an electrolyte issue and it's more of a carbohydrate issue. I don't know if you've seen this, where you guys stand on it, but it's starting to, there's some research behind it. People are starting to think more this carb side than electrolytes.
Gosh, well, I think Oscar in particular has very strong opinions on electrolyte, and I can't help but have the same opinions because I spend a lot of time with him.
He's the expert to me, so go ahead.
He is the expert. So I think right now, and I was really happy. I saw an article the other day that was about how there's this over-prescribing of sodium right now, and there are, and I won't name names, but there's some brands that are pushing excessive sodium at athletes. And they're positioning in such a way that it's the more is better approach. Like, take more sodium because you can't get enough. Well, actually you can take too much sodium, and it can cause stomach problems, and of course there's health implications as well with repeated intake of excessive sodium. So we use, for instance, in the products 200 milligrams of sodium per 30 grams of carbohydrate. Why? Because you have to take into account that you have some reserves. When your carbohydrate intake is based somewhat on duration. So if you're going out for 1 hour, for instance, and you say, okay, I'll take a 30-gram bottle of drink mix, there's no chance you're going to deplete glycogen. It's just maybe a training session, like a 1 hour spin or a 1 hour run. You're getting 200 milligrams of sodium, you're fine. And you go up to 2 hours, we're recommending 60 grams an hour of carbohydrate. You're getting 400 milligrams of sodium automatically out of the box. Again, totally fine. We start going into those really long sessions. Now you're talking 90 grams an hour. When you're taking any of our products at 90 grams an hour of carbohydrate, you're automatically getting 600 milligrams of sodium, which is kind of right in the middle of that average person sodium, like that bell curve sodium loss is a solid number to use. And that's why we use 200 milligrams per 30. We inherently meet many athletes at events that come to us and say, okay, I'm going to take this. Now, by the way, are you hydration or are you carbohydrate, or what are you? That it happens all the time. And we're like, well, we're both. There's sodium and there's carbohydrate in the products. You don't need to think about the sodium intake and the carbohydrate. Let's talk about that. And we usually end up having a productive conversation around their fueling plan. Inherently, though, many athletes are coming and taking copious amounts of sodium. Like, they're taking our product, they're taking 2 packets of LMNT earlier in the day, and they don't necessarily know why. They just believe the more the better. And so we spent a lot of time talking about the balancing act with sodium, that it's not a matter of more is better. the challenge is that endurance athletes, I think, are easy victims, easy culprits for that type of mentality because they believe that more of everything is better. They want more miles, more
Yep.
carbohydrate, fluid, more sodium. And so, but I think for us, the game for us over the next couple of years is really educating around the balancing act around sodium intake because it's something we are right now finalized a partnership with a company called Flow Bio, which does long-term, it's a sodium and sweat loss wearable, so that we can help athletes start to understand how their body reacts with sodium loss and sweat loss under different conditions. And so we're really excited about that partnership. But I do think that's the kind of the next frontier is going to be this conversation around sodium and electrolyte.
Yeah, wearables. I think one of the things that just kind of popped into my head because we talked about carb loading and taking gels up and you're running for 2 hours or whatever. When I talk to athletes and if they're listening, I think it's really important. Like if you do a full carb load, you get about 90 minutes of exercise out of that. But that's stored glycogen. Ideally, you want to keep those stores as full as possible, which is why you want to start fueling from the start. It's not like, oh, I have 90 minutes, then I'm going to start taking my gels. You want to keep your reserves for your reserves because you're going to pull from them anyways. It's just how quickly are you going to drain those. And then you're just relying on circulating, energies, circulating glucose. So I just wanted to make that point. Like we said earlier, 90 minutes of exercise, it doesn't mean start fueling at 90 minutes. It's start fueling from the start. And it'll be interesting to see do you feel like the wearables, you have that partnership, is the future hyper personalized fueling? Do you feel like?
I think it will depend on the athlete. I mean, what's the price of knowing? Right? How much do they want to know? I mean, are we overcomplicating? We inherently we have a lot of athletes I'll meet that come up to us and they do tend to overcomplicate. Some do,
Yeah.
And we have to kind of be like, okay, it's not that complicated. You'll be okay with getting 95% of things right here. But some folks just want to know. They want to know everything. I think there's a market for the wearable community wanting to know like about sodium and sweat loss. They want more than just one number. They want to know how their body reacts over time and what so they can personalize. Our product line allows for a high level of personalization, which is really one of the things that we're modular. So like you can use our S200 sodium booster if you really want to manipulate the sodium level in our mixes. You can do that. Do I think it's the future? I think it's part of the future. I think that there's going to be people that say, look, and we'll see, we've been doing this for 5 years. I have some athletes who are just like, I got my gels, I'm good, leave me alone. And there are other folks that want to know every little detail. But I do think there's a small percentage that really will push the envelope for sure.
I'm thinking of the runners that I know that like wear 2 watches because they're convinced their first watch isn't always accurate. So they want to average them out. Like they're not the common, but they're definitely more common than you would think with the hyper personalized. And I think it's somewhat the running can bring that out of people because it's that, to your point, it's the one sport where in general, I always tell people this, and if they're not a runner, they're kind of offended, but you have to be a special type of person to like force yourself out in some of this weather, early mornings. So you're going to be a little OCD on stuff to some degree, I feel like. But then, to your point, I've been exposed to road running the most, and we talk to trail runners, and I'm like, you don't even have a plan? They're like, no, I just go in the mountains and I just run, and that's all I do. So it's interesting. Like now I'm going back on myself, but I feel like the road runners are a little bit more that I've interacted with are a little bit more caring, and then the trail runners are definitely more nature-y on their approach.
They are. I mean, I've met trail runners. One of the conversations I had at one of the first events is a woman said, I'm running. She was doing an ultra, and she said she uses potassium, and I was like, "You're doing what?" It was kind of a non-starter.
Bananas.
I tried to talk to her, and I was like, "You know what? We're probably not going to have a meeting of the minds here," because she was like, "All sugar's poison," and I was like, "You know what? There's variety for that reason. I mean, but we do see there are trail runners more and more that are. Well, trail running has gone through this massive change now. I think it's definitely, if you were to ask us what sport is evolving the fastest, it's trail running. I used to think when my racing days, the trail runners were all just basically hippie people who weren't concerned about finishing times. And now you've got a lot of high performance athletes in the trail space now, and brands that are high performance brands like us are in that space. It's definitely, gravel's the same thing. I think 5 years ago, Europe thought gravel riding was a bunch of, Americans just riding their dirt bikes, drinking beers. And now they're like, actually, no, they're legitimately very serious athletes. And gravel, it definitely has become, in many ways, as serious as road cycling. So it's evolved very fast, but trail running for sure, it's gone. I mean, now that you have specialization, you have your sub ultras and your ultras and your hill climbs, and there's just, it's incredible how much it's changed in the last 5 years.
Yeah, so we live in Buffalo, and winters are brutal. And I was joking, I ended up signing up for this 50, which is a trail 50. I joke that I was radicalized by YouTube. Like on the treadmill, I feel like I watched all of YouTube, but there's so much content out now. Like you watch Walmsley, and then all of a sudden you're watching DeWalter, and now you're watching, and then you're like, oh my God, I signed up for an ultra, and I feel like the content is really good on some of that long distance stuff that people are transitioning to it. And then you see, the ex-Olympian, she just ran Black Canyon with Ann and
Molly Seidel. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're seeing some of the Olympians, come into the sport. So I don't know what's driving it. Part of me thinks it's a lot of the content that's being created around it, because there seems to be more of a drive on running content. And I know, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank now. The Connor Mance put out a documentary. I know, I just pulled out of Boston, but there's just so much content around now that it's just like, I joke that I was radicalized by YouTube into ultras again. I run them many years ago, but now I'm back in the scene. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Well, it's a pretty awesome scene. If you ever, we're at a lot of trail races. If you ever want to check out our race list and come hang with us for a day, we do a lot of them. I was going to say, it's a pretty amazing community. And I think there's community is probably the thing that makes trails so special, is that a lot of people know each other. They see each other at a lot of events. I mean, they're a pretty unique crowd, so different than when I was running trails. It's just it's a vibrant community. There's a lot of people doing it now. I think a lot of them also just want a break from road, just to try something different. And it's a bit of more of an adventure thing. We do a lot of the extreme ultras too. So we're the sponsor for, like mentioned, Cocodona. That's 250 miles, and that's probably 4, 5, 6 days for, depending on the athlete, of being out in the wilderness. I would say it's adventure racing as much as it is a race. It's probably more, I would say, more of an adventure than anything else.
I feel like too, like the trail scene is a little bit more, it's not, I don't feel like it. It is way more laid back, because you can't compare one race to the next. They're so different, and it's crazy. And I just came back from Utah, and we were in Salt Lake, and I did some climbing there, and the climb we did, I'm like, oh, this would be a great ultra. It was a 10-mile loop, and the first 2 miles goes up 3,000 feet. So it's an average 26% grade. So we did it once. We blew up. It was 85 degrees. We came from Buffalo. It was cold. We got off a plane. We took off at 4 a.m. It was a disaster the first day. So I went back. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hike this really fast, and then I'm going to come down, and I'm going to check and see what the fastest time is. It's amazing to see. Granted, people live out there at elevation, and I don't, but I got up there in an hour and down in 40 minutes. And I'm like, I worked. And then I look at the time, and some guy did it in an hour. I'm like, what is going on? Yeah, it's just, I feel like
serious mountain goats out there.
Yeah, it was to the point where you couldn't even run down it. I watched Walmsley and David Roach run downhill and things. I'm like, I would have ended up over the side of this thing or broken my ankle in 4 places trying to run down some of these things. So it's amazing.
Yeah, it's back when I was racing trail and running trail, it was not, I would say it wasn't the competitive. And I remember thinking back then, could you imagine if a 27-minute 10K guy runs trails? And that day has come. I mean, we run the new athletes. We haven't, we're announcing sponsorship this next week is Christian Allen. Christian Allen is one of the best trail runners in the country in the sub-ultra space. He does he's a VK, like very fast, but he's also a 209 road guy, 209 to a 210 road guy. So just but you're seeing that level of road athlete in trail makes it really exciting because and it's extremely competitive, especially what's going on some of the racing between the U.S. and Europe. It's incredible to watch the speed these guys are clocking, both in the men's and female. And then also like what we saw at Black Canyon this year too, just the tremendous level of competition there especially across the female was just incredible.
Yeah. First, second, and that's 100K. First, second, and third, I think we're within like 2 or 3 minutes of each other, right? Across 62 miles or something. Like, it's wild.
I mean, you're seeing like the changes. Like, I mean, the people are running 15 minutes faster and losing 4 places in their finish.
Yeah,
like
we had 4 course records today, and there's 4 course records, and they were all in like 1 to 4th, and you didn't even win, and you set a course record. So.
Yeah, it's shocking stuff that we're seeing, and it does at every race. It's like you're expecting a record almost at every race now. It's becoming almost mainstream now.
Yeah. I want to bring it back to Neversecond as kind of like an outgoing piece, and I think I could nerd out on the running side for a while, so I figure we'll bring it back to to the brand. Talk to me about, you mentioned earlier, certain products are kind of putting whatever in there, like they're getting the calories in or whatever they're going to get in there, but it's not the same quality of products. I believe you guys have third-party testing or have done it in the past. Can you talk to me about the differentiation there from you guys and the cleanness of the product and how you guys go about that?
Well, so I think in terms of the products themselves, I think if someone was to summarize and say, well, how are you different than a lot of the brands in the space, we formulate verbatim to the evidence. So if you look at a drink mix, and we're building a 2-to-1 drink mix, and you look at our ingredient deck, it's maltodextrin, which is the glucose, that's 2-to-1. The second is the fructose. The third is the trisodium citrate, which is your sodium source. So they're like minimalist formulas that are verbatim. So in the little things like the type of maltodextrin we use, so the raw material quality, we spend a lot of time getting that right. Someone could say, oh, well, maltodextrin's the same. Well, not really. It's not. It's not all the same. There's different variations in it and different types that you can buy. So I think our formulas are verbatim to the evidence, and they're very well made from that perspective. Because we are involved in so many different facets of the business, and I think, well, all of us, the brands are, but let's just talk about it. We deal with races and race directors. They have pressure to deliver a high quality product on course. We deal with retailers, professional athletes who get drug tested. So we established a hard line with drug testing, banned substances testing early on. Some brands don't test their products. They are more lifestyle products. I don't know how you work with professional athletes and races if you don't ban substances test. Because if someone gets a positive doping and there's going to be an investigation, you want to, obviously, as the brand, make sure that it's not your product. But the reality is, I think the last number I heard is 13% of supplement products have banned substances to some level in them. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty high number. And so in any event, we use Inform Sport as our certifier. Every batch of every product is banned substances tested. It's really expensive. It's a big bill every year that we pay, but it's something that we believe in because it's important to ensure our products and to make all of our partners that we work with feel comfortable with us as a partner.
I'm sure that came out of necessity, but do you feel like this is a bigger, in part of my watching all of YouTube, I also watched a good chunk of Netflix on my training this winter. And I watched I don't know if you've seen it, the Tour de France. Netflix does the Tour de France on there, and they get drug tested over and over again. Do you feel like it was a priority early because you started in cycling, or no, it was a priority early regardless of where we were going to start?
I mean, I think we just can't. The cycling was just, I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think for us, it was really just doing the right thing. Because we knew it was going to matter. We knew how important it was. And you're seeing, I mean, there's every day I look at Instagram, there's a new athlete getting with a a doping problem, and this is happening almost daily. And yet I also know certain races, even extremely well-known races, that don't require a partner like us. They have partners, their nutrition partners, that are not having their products tested. So imagine what they're doing. They're putting the products on the course with professional athletes who may have to take the product because they ran out or they need something, and they don't have the safety and security of knowing that it's a safe product. So for us, it's really just came out of just wanting to make sure that we were doing the right thing. And cycling obviously has a long history with doping. Running, more and more, I'm seeing more and more of it. We've had a couple cases this past year in the trail running world, believe it or not, wherever there's stakes and there's prize money, and even with amateurs, not even professionals. Triathlon has plenty of it. So we just want to make sure that we're part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Yeah. As we look forward to, Buffalo coming up and people getting out there, you mentioned you're working with retailers, you're direct to consumer through your site. What's the best way for people to get started? Do you recommend a specific, obviously do you have a flavor pack? How do you recommend someone being like, okay, I'm going to get this into my training now, so when it's on course, I'm ready to go? Where should they start?
Well, I was going to say a lot of it depends on where they live. If they're not in the Buffalo area and they want to buy online, they can always go to our website, never2.com. The products, we have a trial pack. We offer a lot of flavors within the gels, because specifically when we're talking about marathon, the gels will be the most important product. We have a gel trial pack that both flavored and an unflavored one. I personally like the flavors. There's no real technical advantage of unflavored versus flavored. It's just a matter of preference. Some athletes will complain about flavor over time if they're taking a flavored gels, but I personally haven't had that problem. But we do have 2 trial packs. They're a great way to try both the caffeinated and non-caffeinated. I would mention there is C30 is the gels that have no caffeine, and if they have C30 plus, that means it has caffeine in it. In those trial packs, there are caffeine options as well, so you can experiment with those, find out what you like, and then you can always just go and, if you, for instance, you like a variety, you can keep buying those packs, or if you want to, for instance, you find that citrus is your favorite choice, you can buy whole boxes of citrus then. And then, of course, we have the event. We just started a partnership with a retailer local as well, so don't have the website on the top of my head, but we can certainly buy it locally at that retailer as well.
Is that Runner's Roost through the Buffalo Marathon?
It is Runner's Roost through the Buffalo Marathon.
Perfect. Great. So we'll definitely make sure people can go there to pick that up. They have, stores in the South Towns and North Towns in Buffalo, so that'll be good. I'm just curious, when you were mentioning like the problems that you're solving, there's been problems like how to open these gels, because that is a big problem when you're out there, and especially if you miss tear and then you're like, oh my God, now I can't even get this thing open, which happens all the time. What problems are you guys actively solving right now as far as either the gel itself, the packaging it's in, or things that you're hearing that you're working on?
Great question. So a few things. One, we're tweaking the pack to make it slightly thinner laminate so that it tears a little easier. Some cyclists don't have an issue, but sometimes runners, if they have really sweaty hands, might have a hard time tearing a pack. So that's like a little thing we're a little adjustment we're making, slightly thinner film. It's always a balancing act, as you want to make sure it doesn't puncture during transit and things like this. We are long-term. Some athletes have asked us about eliminating packaging altogether. We have a gel flask, which holds 3 or 4 gels. And we'll be launching a certain number of our flavors in bulk so that you can actually just pour it. You can leave the bulk package in your fridge and you can pour it into your gel flask.
Like this gallon, yeah. How does that work with a 30, 60, 90 if you had like a bigger flask? Is it just like, oh, you're going to have markings on it and you just take to a certain point, or?
That is a great question. And it is, we fought it for a little while because a lot of times you're just trying to make decisions that are not perfect. So yes, we'd liked if there were no wrappers. I've been asked by consumers, is there a more friendly wrapper? No, there isn't. There just isn't. I've been doing this my whole life, and you need a film and a foil to give it shelf life. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. The gel flask is a great way to kind of not have to deal with wrapper fumbling. The downside is that you can't see what 30 grams is. So now athletes who use this over time can pretty much meter it. They can tell, like, when I drink from the flask, it's about 15 grams at a pop. So if they take 2 sips, they've got 30 grams roughly, but it's not as perfect as using a gel pack.
Yeah. I have one thing that is probably not something that you guys can solve, but I know I hear my wife talk about it a lot, which is, how do I carry all these things? Yeah. And I think there's a niche there where if you guys can figure out a way to easily carry all these gels, you're golden, because I can't see, like, my wife now buys things based on how many pockets it has, like her attire, because she's got to carry all these gels.
It's something that we definitely, the flask we thought was a good solution, because some athletes want to hand carry. We are launching a run bottle, which is for some athletes who want to be able to carry drink mix in a bottle. So we're launching one of those soon, which to me it's commonly used by, like, I would say more like elite marathoners. They use the bottle for a period and then typically chuck it during the event. So we have that coming out. But yeah, this is not. It's not an easy solve, because you're trying to, like, yes, you're carrying a lot of weight, frankly, with those gels too. So we tend to work with races to make sure, especially with mass participation, that the aid station locations are really important. Some of the marathons we've encountered, they have very wide gaps between the aid stations, which is not ideal, and we're always trying to push them to see if we can get maybe an aid station every 3 to 5 miles would be ideal, especially earlier on. The one, like, having one at, we always recommend maybe taking a gel 15 minutes before the start, so you kind of start the process, and then, but having one at maybe the 5K mark or 5 miles in would be ideal. And that's something that we're always trying to push partners to have.
Yeah. Are you pushing partners also to do some form of caffeinated gel at, like, the later aid stations, or is that something that you try not to do?
Well, it's funny, with caffeine's so personal, but a good piece of advice would be try and take a caffeine gel an hour 30 before the finish. If you're going to take one caffeine gel, I would either take it pre-start, or I would take it an hour 30 maybe from the finish, and trying to position that one. It just comes down to a lot of times logistics with the races, but that's something that we would want to have happen.
Awesome. Bill, thank you. I appreciate your time. It's been great. We can go to Runners.
The Buffalo Marathon Podcast is presented by our official training partner, Run Smart. Whether you're training for the full marathon, the half, or the 5K, the Run Smart app helps you train smarter with plans and guidance built by physical therapists who understand runners. From your first run to race weekend, Run Smart helps you show up prepared. Head to the App Store and download the Run Smart app today.